For this video, we are going to start with the straps and grab handle instructions. So you should have the main body all put together, and now we are on this section of our instructions, straps and grab handle. So let's see what our instructions are. Step 1, stitch the long edges of straps and grab handle together so that you have 2 long tubes and 1 short tube. Okay, so how does that actually look in reality? So the pieces you need, your grab handle is piece number 6. What you're going to do is you're going to take this piece, turn it right side up, and then fold it right sides together like a hot dog. Okay? Boop. Hot dog fold. So we're going to just fold that on itself and pin it together. So we're going to pin our corners, match our corners first, just like what we did with other pieces. All right. Make sure that's all nice and neat. Stick a couple pins in the middle, matching our stitch lines. Okay. I'm going to do about 3 pins on this one. Ooh, that's off. There we go. Okay, there we go. So you've got it all pinned together. You've got your stitch lines matched up. So what you'll do then is you'll take it to the sewing machine and you're going to stitch right on that stitch line. So here's the grab handle. It's the short one. We're going to do the exact same steps with the straps. So why don't we speed through this since it's pretty easy and straightforward. So we've got it all pinned. I'm going to show you how we stitch the grab handle, and we do the exact same thing with the straps. So I'll show you in real time the grab handle, and then in sped up time the straps. So all we're doing is we're just going to stitch on this seam line. It's really easy. So back stitch at the beginning and the end. Take out my pins as I go. Okay, so if you'll notice too, I am currently stitching with green thread, which worked really great with my last fabric, but doesn't really match this yellow. That's okay. I really don't care if your thread matches. And on this step, it really won't matter because you won't see this thread from the right side. Anyway, not really. Not unless you pull it really hard. Okay, so that's it. You just made a tube. So I can still get in to both sides here. Boop, boop. Dee, dee, dee. All right, that's what you're doing. You're making a tube. So set this piece aside and then do the straps. And how about we speed through that because it's exactly the same thing. All right, now that we have them all stitched, we're ready to move forward. So some of the things you're going to need for this step, you're going to need your scissors. You will need a safety pin. The bigger, the better, because that'll make turning it right side out a lot easier. Also, under the sewing table, there is a metal or wooden dowel rod. Kind of depends on whether or not we've got one. If not, you can do the step without a dowel rod. It's just a little trickier. The dowel rod makes it look a lot nicer. So before we get started on, let's see, what step are we on? We are on step 2. Press open seam using a dowel rod. All right, so before we do that, I'm actually going to take the iron and just hit the seam. Now, I'm not hitting this folded edge because I don't want to press a crease into that. So I'm just hitting just the seam real quick, just to kind of lock all the stitches together. This does happen at the same time that you're doing the press open. I just like to make it 2 separate steps because, again, I think it turns prettier when you do it that way. So again, on the straps, I'm not catching this folded edge under the iron because I don't want to press a crease in that. Boop. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to take one of our pieces. I'm going to start with the grab handle because it's a little shorter. You're going to take the dowel rod and, actually, nope. Aha, this is what we need the scissors for. So just on the grab handle, we want to trim down this seam allowance because it's a little long for this piece when we turn it right side out. If we trim this down, it will make turning everything turn out a lot nicer, and it's easier to cut it at this point than after we've pressed the seam open. So what I'm going to do is I'm just kind of cut this seam in half, so it's about 1/4 of an inch long. Get rid of that extra. Okay, so now the seam allowance is a little smaller. That'll just make everything look a lot prettier. Now we need our dowel rod. So we're just going to slide this little tube over the dowel rod. Now if you've got the metal dowel rod, be extra careful when you're doing this step because the metal will get hot. If you have a wooden dowel rod, you should still be careful because it will still get hot, but it's not going to hold the heat in the same way that the metal one is. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of push all of this fabric to the side so that when I go to, dowel rod's catching on stuff on the other end. So when I go to press this seam open, what's happening, the reason we're using the dowel rod is it's not going to create a crease in the other sides of the fabric. So I'm just going to press this open using the dowel rod as the space that I'm pushing my open seam against in order to stitch it. And by stitch it, I mean press it. Yeah, see how pretty that is? Nice and open, and then we didn't create any weird creases. This is still a nice, pretty, round tube. All right? We're going to do that with all the steps. Let's see. Yep. So I'm going to show you the next steps, and then I'm going to speed run through the straps because they're just so long, and it'll take a while. So we have pressed our seam open. And now what you're going to do is you're going to take your safety pin because now we want to do step number 3. Turn straps right side out and press flat. So we're going to take our safety pin and open it up, and you're going to just catch one edge of your fabric. Okay, so just one edge like that. You're going to take that safety pin, stuff it into the hole, and that's what you're going to use to turn this right side out. So I'm going to slide the fabric onto the safety pin. And pretty nice stuffing, and then slowly pull this fabric that I have crinkled up onto the safety pin out so that this starts to turn right side out. Tubes are just, this is how you turn tubes right side out. It's just slow and a little annoying, but it's necessary, and it will turn out really great to have all of these seams encased. So you're just turning your tube right side out, and you're using the safety pin as a way to do that. All right, so now I've got my safety pin coming out. I'm going to pull it out enough that I can get a hold of the fabric it's attached to, because you don't want to pull too hard on the safety pin or you might accidentally rip through your fabric. You're just using it as a way to turn it around. All right, so now it's all beautifully turned right side out. Get that safety pin off of there. Make sure all of these edges are turned out. So we have a lovely tube. Whoop, whoop. Yeah, look at that tube. All nice and pretty. So now we want to press this flat. Okay, so our seam allowance was pressed open, so that should make pressing it flat really easy. What you'll want to do, you can do it 2 ways. You can either press it so that the stitching seam is on the side, or you can also, I prefer to do it this way because I think it makes for a stronger strap. I'm going to line up the seam here in the middle of the tube. So when I press it flat, it becomes a nice long rectangle, and I'm just eyeballing, putting that seam in the visual middle. And now we're going to press it flat. Give it a good hit with the steam so that any wrinkles from turning it right side out come out. And look, now it's all nice and flat. And we have a strip that will become our grab handle. Okay, so I'm going to pause. We're going to speed run through these longer straps. It's exactly the same thing. We're just going to go through it a little faster. So now we have our grab handles and our straps all nicely pressed, and I have put the seam line right in the middle of that instead of on the folded edge here. And now we are ready for step number 4, which says to stitch 1/8 of an inch away from the long edges. So here's what that looks like. So on the machine, you're going to line up the edge of your fabric halfway between this center opening and the edge of the presser foot. So I like to, in this little open window in here, I like to line up the edge of my fabric right there, because I know that's around 1/8 of an inch. So we're just going to stitch all the way down, going nice and carefully so that it comes out nice and straight and pretty. What this stitch is doing is it's serving kind of two functions. First of all, it's a bit of a decorative stitch, so if you don't like the thread color that you are using, and you just know that these stitches are going to be seen. I'm continuing with my green thread because I like that contrast visually, and I'm a little lazy to change out my thread to yellow. But the other thing that this stitch is doing is it is also giving extra stability to the straps and the grab handle, so when they're pulled, they can take that pressure and pull. Okay, so we're going to do the other sides here. Whoop! Machine came unthreaded. Needle came unthreaded. This is why it's important to leave long tails. All right, try again. There we go. So now it's all beautifully stitched, and we can move on to the straps. So we're going to do the same thing with the straps, and I'm going to speed run through it. I'm going to pause right here real quick and say, for the straps, I'm actually going to shift a little bit so that I'm on the edge of the presser foot, because these are so wide that the stitch being over a little bit, I think looks a little better. So let's keep rolling. Okay, at the end of that speed run, my bobbin ran out, so I fixed it and finished it up. I just didn't show you on video. The other thing that I did, so both of these straps now have both rows of stitching. The other thing that I did that I didn't show you is that I did take these straps and the grab handle to the iron, and I gave them another good press just on top to lock these stitches into place. So now we're ready for our last step of the straps and grab handle section. Step number 5. Pin grab handle and the straps to the bag, machine based in the seam allowance. So we need our straps and we need our grab handle. We're going to work with the straps first. You will also need the main body of your bag. So this is the front. The side with the pocket is the front. So we want to flip it over. And we want to be working with the side that is the top. So if we're looking at our bag, this is up and down. Here's our pocket. The bottom of the pocket is down. above the pocket at the top. So we're working on the top there. So we're going to take our straps, and if you will actually open up the inside of your bag, right at the center of the back, you should see a little notch. If you forgot this notch, that's okay. Just kind of measure, find the middle. Because here's what we want to do. We want to line up your strap. We're going to match cut edge to cut edge. And we're going to put each edge of the strap on either side of this notch. So I'm going to make it easier for you guys to see the notch from the right side, I'm going to stick a pin right here. Okay, can you guys see that pin okay? Great. So I'm going to put one strap matching up the cut edge on one side of this pin. Pin it in place, just like this. Okay, and then I'm going to take the other strap and place it right beside the other one on the other side of that pin so that these are landing right in the middle of the bag. Pin that in place. Okay, so there we go. That's what it looks like on either side of the notch. This pin right here in the middle was the notch. Okay, and we're just matching up the cut edges because we're going to baste it together in the seam allowance, kind of like we did with the pocket earlier. So our straps are going to go like that. This next step, you want to make sure that you're really careful and you don't twist your straps when you're doing this. You want your straps to be nice and flat. Now, one thing I did is I chose to have the side with the center seam facing towards the body of the bag. So when this is on my body, it's like this. Okay? So I'm going to make sure my straps are nice and flat. Just going to kind of pull one down so I can get to the bottom. And I'm going to line up this bottom, the bottom of the strap with the bottom of the bag. So here's my side seam. There's my stitching from before. I'm going to place this right beside that, matching the cut edge. I'm going to pin that in place. Getting too many pins by accident. And I'm just using 2 pins here. Okay, so let's zoom in real quick so you guys can kind of see. So it's right beside the stitching that's beside the side seam. Okay, and this is not twisted at all. Okay, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to take the other strap, match it up to the other side seam, cut edge to cut edge, right beside that stitching, and pin it down. Because what we're going to do is we're pinning all of these straps down and the grab handle down, and then we can just machine baste through all of it at once instead of doing this in little baby steps. Okay, so at the bottom of the bag, so there's my pocket, that's the bottom. The bottom, the straps are on either side of the back piece, and at the top, they are centered on the center, one strap on each side of the center. So now we've got our straps in place. Let's get our grab handle in place. So here's what I'm going to do. I want my grab handle, the seam line to be facing towards the fabric. So here's what I'm going to do, because we want to rotate this so that it does this lovely little loop that we see on backpacks. So here's how you do that. So you lay it perfectly flat with the side that you want facing out. We're going to take one edge, put it right beside one side of the straps, pin that in place, cut edge to cut edge, just like this. Okay, so now if we were to pull it out, it's going to go perfectly straight and be just like the strap beside it. So now we're going to take this side, drag it around, not twisting it. It looks like it's twisting. It's really not. It's just turning. We're going to turn it and keep turning it until we can put it on the other side of the other strap. Okay? This part is really tricky and it's easy to accidentally get your strap twisted. So right now it kind of looks like it's twisted, but it really isn't. If I were to kind of smush this down, you can see that this is all going the same way. There's no twists if you follow one edge of the turn. Okay? All right, so now this is all pinned on here. We are going to baste this on the sewing machine. Baste the top and the bottom. All right, so remember we are basting the seam allowance, which means we do not want to stitch on this stitch line. We want our stitching to fall between these two lines. Because the seam allowance is 5/8, we can just line up the cut edge of our fabric with the edge of our presser foot, and we will be within that seam allowance. Okay, so I'm going to baste this with just a regular stitch length. All of the basting that I'm doing for this particular project, I'm not changing the stitch length because there really isn't a need. Sometimes you would make it a longer stitch, but I'm not going to, just so that I know that these pieces aren't going to come out between steps if I'm not doing the bag in one sitting, which you guys are not. So, all right, I'm going to back stitch. And because my pins are running perpendicular, not parallel to the cut edge, I can just stitch right over them. They're not my way this way. Just running the cut edge right along the edge of the presser foot. Making sure this catches exactly the way I want to. Back stitch again. Trim my thread at the beginning and the end. Alright, so now I can just take these pins out, and these are attached momentarily, and all of that stitching is not on the stitch line. So we're going to stitch over these straps and the grab handle again later when we put more pieces on. So this is going to get extra levels of stitches. The more rows of stitches you have, the more secure it is. So that is the top edge. So now we're going to do the bottom edge. These are so far apart that I'm going to actually back stitch on either side of the strap, stop, and then go do the other one instead of back stitching, sewing all the way down this bottom length to get across the other one. Again, I'm lining up just the cut edge of my fabric with the edge of the presser foot. Do the other one. Now, when you're stitching this part, there are actually quite a few layers of fabric that you're stitching through, so if your machine sounds slightly different, not drastically different, but slightly different when you're going through all of this, it's just the sound of your machine having to work through all of the layers. Particularly if you ended up picking a really thick fabric. It's going to make a boom, boom, boom kind of sound, just because it's having to punch through more layers. So now we can pull that off, and look. Our straps are attached. It's starting to look like a backpack, guys. Look at this. Look at that back. That's a backpack. Boop. All right, so we have finished the straps and grab handles portion of the instructions. You're ready to move on to the flap instructions.